Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Bus. On this one, we are installing the ARB air locker. So this is going to go on my front diff, got other plans for my rear diff. I've been alluding to this for a while about this modification coming up. But anyways, let's get into it. So there's the air locker. I'm not actually going to be installing the air locker into the diff myself, because sometimes if you do it yourself and you don't know what you're doing, like I've never pulled the diff apart, the air locker will leak, and I don't want it to leak. So I'm actually going to pull the diff center out and give it to a professional to do, because like I said, I don't want to stuff it up and I don't want to have it leaking on me. I've also got the air compressor already. I've just got the air activation system, so instead of a full compressor, I like the practicality of having a compressor that you can just connect to a battery and take anywhere. So I'll have this just for the lockers or the locker, and then I will have an external compressor that I can just connect to any battery on any car. It's just more practical to have, because then I can take it anywhere. But let's get into pulling the axles out and then the front diff out, and then have a look at installing the compressor while we wait for the air locker to get installed. If you do want to see how an ARB air locker is installed into a diff, I do recommend watching Aussie Arvo's video on how to install an ARB air locker. It's a pretty comprehensive video, and it's very, very well done. And I am definitely glad I got a professional to do mine, because it would be it's a bit of a full-on process. But getting into the video anyways, we've got to jack up the car. It's always usually like the first step on any car video is jack up the car. So I do have a couple sets of hands here. I've got Adam over there helping me, and then I've also got my brother-in-law Nick. So thankfully they came out. I did get the air locker as a birthday present actually. So you know, these guys are all coming around to give me a hand and help me pull the diff and axles and everything out as part of a bit of a birthday present. So if you haven't pulled your axles out before, it's actually a pretty easy job on one of these LN106s. So first things first, you got to take off the locking hubs. So that's quite a simple job. All the bearings and everything the whole hub with all the bearings have to come out, along with the brake caliper and everything like that. After you get the first bit off, there is a circlip sitting back there. This is pretty easy job to get off. I have a pretty shitty pair of circlip pliers. They're not really the best, but I've used them enough now, and I've done enough work on the Hilux with them. So we've got to remove the locking nut, the locking ring, and the bearing nut now. So this is a 54mm socket. I definitely recommend getting the 54mm socket. I have done it in the past with screwdrivers and a hammer to undo these nuts. Not nearly as good, and certainly not the right way to do it. So I do have that 54mm socket. They're only like $20 or thereabouts. You can find them cheaper at different places. And then the caliper has to come off, as you can see there sitting on the leaf spring, and then the whole thing just slides off. So this side looks like it came off super easy and everything, right? Well, the other side was pretty seized up with the bearings. The bearings weren't in great shape. So, and while it's apart anyways, I am going to be doing all the bearings, which just makes sense. It's kind of a no-brainer. Thankfully, the swivel hubs are in really good nick, and they weren't rebuilt too long ago. And it hasn't really had any hard wheeling or been drowned or anything like that since then. So we're not really going to bother with the swivel hub side of things. And, you know, I tend to think with swivel hubs, if they aren't leaking, don't touch them. Once they're actually leaking, that's when you jump in and sort them out, because they are such a dog of a job, and no one loves doing swivel hubs. I mean, if you have someone that says they love doing swivel hubs, you are talking to a sociopath. So no one loves doing them, full stop. Next up is the bolts for the stub axle and the rear rotor backing plate. So they just come out with the 8 bolts, I believe it is, and then the brake line and everything has to be loosened off, so that way we can actually pull that out of the way easily. The stub axle does have to get removed next. Now, I obviously sealed it up quite well. We had some taps with the hammer straight on the surface. So we're just going to get a screwdriver in to just break that gasket that sealed it up really nicely. And there we go, it slipped straight off. Almost came off. That could have been the threads on their way out, but luckily it stopped right before the end of the axle. It's looking pretty manky in there. Everything's going to need a good clean up. However, in there you can see that it's just bearing grease, and it's it's actually looking quite good back there. It's in between the stub axle and the locking nuts, or the locking hub. That's where we saw a lot of water and just crappy grease. Thought I'd take a second just to point out how good is Adam's safety boots, mate. Look at those. There was bloody grease all over the ground from when we pulled this off, so love to be doing his washing. Last thing to be done before the axles come out and the diff comes out is the diff oil. Now, thankfully, Nick did remind me to pull this out because I was off in La La Land, and I probably would have forgotten it, and then we would have gone to pull the diff out, and it would have been a great experience all round not. These axles have a flat spot on them, or the CVs and axles, and then they're pretty easy to pull out. Just got to rotate to the flat spot, and then they come straight out. Drive shaft comes out. That's another simple job. Just got to get on the spanners, and off we go. Got to take off all the nuts from the studs that are holding the diff in, and then we can pull the diff out. I have muted the audio on this clip as well because you guys don't need to hear my excessive grunting while I pull this out. But nonetheless, it came straight out, no worries. The front diff center gears are looking really good. You can see the ring gear there is pretty happy, and the pinion gear is also quite happy. And all of the center will be getting removed anyways, and then the air locker will go in there. Looking at all of the old bearings, they are shagged. Look how rusty that is. Definitely water's gotten there. The stub axles need a good clean, and there is the diff with no axles in it or diff center. Considering I'm not installing the locker myself, let's get onto the compressor. On today's unboxing episode, you will now see the ARB air system compressor. Compact onboard air kit. There you go. There's a manual. Good shit. Bunch of wires. Good shit. What else we got next? Ooh, we've got the compressor itself. Look at that one. And then we'll have our switches and our bracket plate to mount it. And there's the air filter to go in. And then here it is, just the little compressor. I only got the little one because that's all I'm going to need. It's only going to be front locks. Even though this can technically do twin locks. Man, that was easier. Oh, look at that little baby. Oof. Isn't that a bit lush? It's a bit too nice for someone like me, isn't it? Onto the air compressor install. We've got the plate there. We're just going to mount it all up. We're going to drill straight through the floor. I've got grommets though, so that way it's all going to seal and it's all going to be watertight. I do paint it up, and just mount up the bracket and put it straight through behind the driver's seat. Won't bore you with drilling holes, but there it is. It's got rubber above, rubber below to take out vibration, grommets, and then the bolts are going through. We did go up a little bit of size in bolts just because it worked out better, and then it's all mounted in. I've cut out a bit of carpet just so that way it wasn't sitting there. The switches do fit in the factory blanking plates with a little bit of a file down the sides. As you can see, I already got the compressor side in. But with the wiring, it's actually quite easy. This diagram's super simple. Everything's labeled. All you've got to do is plug the harness together and then connect it to your ignition and power and ground. I have done the wiring. I've run it all under that trim there, all under the carpet, up into behind the dash. Look how filthy behind that dash is. It's a 35-year-old car. It's expected. And there we go. That is the magic noise that we want. So you can hear when I'm pressing that, that is actuating the air locker solenoid, which is awesome. And the pressure switch is also working, as you heard it cut it off there when it hit the pressure it needed. On the Monday, I did actually drop the diff off, and in the same day they had it done. They were waiting on bearings for the F-150 up there on their hoist, but I actually got it done by PDR, and PDR actually does all the ARB air locker installs
for Geelong and sometimes Ballarat, as they don't have someone on to do that. Thanks, Phil, for getting that one sorted for me so quick. Let's reinstall this diff center. I've just used some sandpaper just to clean up the rest of the gasket off the diff housing. The diff side looks good. I have got myself a diff gasket. This one was a little bit hard to track down. Most places I had to order it in, but I managed to get one. And I got some gasket paper for the stub axle, so that way I can make up some for the stub axle. So let's use some Permatex over here. Yeah, nice. Look at that bottle. Isn't that awesome? It's everywhere. But we're going to use some Permatex both sides of that. Push that onto the housing and then push the diff on and then tighten everything up. I did try and put the center in by hand. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to lift it up above my face and slide it in, as I felt like I was going to drop it and smash my face with the diff. Now, I called my old man after I had installed it, and he turned around and called me weak as piss because I couldn't lift it in. But either way, we're still going to get it in. Honestly, plan B was a much better time anyways. So all I did was just strap the diff to the back of the jack and made sure that it wasn't, as I jacked it up, it wasn't going to pull the diff too much in one direction. And then once I had a couple of them slipped on the studs, it was pretty straightforward. All I had to do was loosen off the strap just a little bit, get it all lined up nice and straight, because I really was worried about that copper hose. I didn't want to pay for it all to get installed and then fuck it up essentially. So I was being super careful, and that's why I also opted not to lift it above my head. Now that it's all in, let's get back to putting it all back together. So axles in, stub axles on. There's 2 gaskets there. They made me rethink my life choices, as I had to line up the 8 bolt holes with the 2 sets of gaskets, with the stub axle, with the threads, and then with the brake disc cover. After that, it was knocking the bearing races out, which is easy enough. You just need a punch and a hammer, and then you just make sure you're not scoring the side where it all has to go back together. And then you've got to grease up the bearings and then knock the new bearing races in, and then it's easy going from there. Whack a seal in the back as you have to, and off we go. Put the hub back on. Once the hub's back on, we do have to think about doing the nuts and the preload on the bearings. So you do have to put in the washer, wind those in, and then this is where you do your bearing preload. So what you need to do, you actually need to tighten these up a fair whack, so that way you can get the bearings to seat, and then you've got to back it off, and then you've got to get the bearing preload. If you don't do this, the bearings do heat up, and then it will cause premature failure. Then we've got to do the locking nut with the locking ring. That's what I'm doing there. You just got to get the screwdriver and hammer that down, so that way they are really snug against the 2 nuts. Then the first part of the locking hub goes on with the circlip over the axle with all the gaskets. Then it is all polished up, and then we can test it after we have cable tied all the hose up and out of the way. Oh yeah, ARB cable toys. Sick. Now let's see if all this hard work has paid off and if it's all working as it should be. Rocker on, switch clicked. Compressor stop. Good, means we're just getting pressure. What the fuck? Oh. Ha ha, gotta lock the hubs. Ready? Nice. It doesn't have oil in it, so pretty important that we don't do that too much, but it's working. So now that the front lock is installed, I think it's only fair that we get a bit of a comparison to the completely unlocked Hilux to now the front locked Hilux. Up the same obstacles, same car, same obstacles, just it's got a front diff lock in it now. So let's get some side-by-sides. Here's the first obstacle with the fully unlocked Hilux. It's not even up to the proper first obstacle and it's already spinning wheels. I line up for another approach when it was fully unlocked, and even then we're still running into issues. So if it wasn't going to make it on the other line, then it definitely wasn't going to make it on this line. So let's see how she handles being front locked. I think it's pretty easy to tell which one's the unlocked Hilux and which one's the front locked Hilux, given that now the other one has no rooftop tent on it, and the front locked one does have a rooftop tent. I did slip into this hole and give her a bit of a stall, but these things happen.
You're like on the wall.
I'm not coming from the exact same line as I did last time. However, the Hilux actually didn't even make it this far. So where it's just dropped into, it didn't make it that far at the last go. Let's see it go up. Bloody makes short work of that. And just to think, last time it was spinning wheels like nothing up that. This one isn't too bad. This isn't really a hard obstacle, but it gives a good comparison of seeing the front lock versus the no lock. See right there, that's the difference between a front locker, because I am, exactly like Nick says, I am going to need to pop it up. So you see how much harder that was on the car compared to how much effort the front locker is going to need. And here is the difference. Even going up the hill, I did have the front locker on, and even going up the hill you can see that I'm actually not even having to drive it nearly as fast as I did before, just to make it push it over the mounds and make sure I kept up enough momentum that it didn't bottom out completely. So there we go. That is how much of a difference that makes. They're just two small obstacles. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to do some more stuff out there, but I do think it is a very, very clear difference. And I mean, front locker costs a lot, but you can really see the impact, the difference here. As a bonus, here's a little clip of me in my wife's D-Max trying to turn it around on the track with no locks, front or rear, and small tyres. Yeah, not a good time. So there we go, the locker install successfully done. I am very glad I got a professional to do the actual locker install into the diff. Like I said, I did not want to make this thing leak, and I didn't want to stuff it up in any way given how much it costs. So thought the best thing to do is get the professionals to do it, and it has really made a difference. I was a bit surprised at a couple of spots there going up the track. I don't even have to give it to it. It just kind of just crawls now that it's got the both wheels at the front driving itself up. So yeah, but anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one when we got the next mod coming. Mate. Go again. Professional to actually do it. Look at the flies on me. This is ridiculous. Alright, go again.